Hey, good morning, options traders. Well, we had a few people asking last week about how I created some of the risk graphs, especially using shares of stock. And some of the traders said that they were on some websites that would let them use calls and puts, but not include shares of stock. My guess is that they probably do. There might be a workaround, but I had mentioned that if you are at least okay with Excel, they're very easy to do in Excel. And I said that I would post a video to show you some little tips and tricks on how to create some risk graphs real easily in Excel. So let's go see how that's done. As always, before we do, please be sure to click like and subscribe. It's greatly appreciated and helps to promote the channel. So the risk graphs, we're talking about these things. Remember, this is a profit and loss diagram, which just means it's showing the resulting profit or the resulting loss at various stock prices. So these are stock prices across the horizontal, and then these are the profits and losses. And if we're at zero, that's break even. So we can see that the strategy breaks even at this price. If we are at 105, I can trace a line up there. I can see that we're at maximum gain, which looks to be just a touch over 3 with the stock at 105. We can see that the strategy flattens out for all stock prices above 105 or hits its maximum loss for all stock prices below 100. So that can be a really handy tool, which is why they were created, because this stuff can start to get real complicated when you're using combinations of calls, puts, long, short, shares of stock, closing positions, and you might want an easy way to figure out what your resulting position is. And there's a real easy way to do it in Excel. So let's bring up an Excel spreadsheet. All right, so now we're into an Excel spreadsheet, and this is by no means meant to be a full programming class on Excel. I'm assuming that you know some of the basics, but I'll try to explain some of these things as we go along. If you're looking for a real quick way, we might call it the brute force method, we're just going to kind of enter this stuff in by hand. So let's say that we have a $100 call. I need a list of stock prices. I'm going to create a column of stocks. Let's say I want to start from a stock price of 80 and want to count by fives. Now there's a little trick we can do in Excel. I could either manually type them in, of course that would be the slowest, but I can get the pattern started. I want to start with 80, and then this one is obviously 5 points higher. If I highlight both of those, and I do that by just left mouse clicking and dragging down, you'll notice there's a little box down here on the right. That's a copy handle. I'm going to left mouse click and drag, and Excel recognizes that we are counting by fives. So it's just going to repeat that pattern all the way down. Let me also go and center these, be a little easier to see. So the $100 call, if the stock is 80, we know it's 0 at expiration. We also know it's 0 for all stock prices up to and including the strike. So I'm going to just grab that little handle and make them zeros. Now what if the stock is 105 at expiration? 100 call is worth 5. At 110, it's worth 10. Now once I've gotten this pattern started, I know it's just going to continue because I've counted by fives over here on my stock price column. So we know that the $100 call is going to continually pick up $5 at each of these stock prices. So let's just highlight those two and then copy it down. And there we go. Now if I highlight this whole column, I can come up here to Insert, click on the chart, line chart, and there is, in this case it would be a payoff diagram because we have no cost. Now we can also go through and pretty these things up. I usually get rid of the grid lines. If you want to, you can right mouse click, do Format Axis, come over here to Number, slide down to General. We can make it Currency. If you want 2 decimal places, if you don't want any, you can change that right there. So we can go through and really change this up a lot. I can also right mouse click on the line, Format Data Series. I can change the color. I can change the thickness. All kinds of things I can do. Just about anything you can imagine that you would like to do to this graph can be done. But just to get a basic idea, you can see it's very, very easy if you at least understand your options, how they're priced at expiration. It's either 0 or intrinsic value. Now, what if we wanted to make it a true profit or loss diagram where we are accounting for cost? Well, let's say that I paid $5 for this call. I'm going to create another column, and we always start with an equal sign in Excel, or at least that's one way to tell it that a formula is coming, and we just need to enter the formula. I can also point to cells with a mouse if I want. My formula is I want to take that number minus 5. Let's say that I paid $5 for this call. So if I copy this formula down, the way that Excel sees it is look to the cell to the left and then subtract 5. Okay, so we look left is 0, minus 5 is minus 5. Look what happens when we get down here. Look to the cell to the left is 10, minus 5 is 5. Here, look to the cell to the left is 15, minus 5 is 10. That's the way that Excel sees this formula. It's called relative referencing because that's the way that I programmed it. I just said, take this one minus 5. And now I can click here, and this blue bounding box shows the numbers that are being used to generate this graph. I can left mouse click on it and drag it to a different column. See, now it's showing minus 5. You'll also notice that the graph shows on the horizontal the numbers 1 through 13. If we want our stock prices, right mouse click on our line, come down here to select data, and over here is the button for your horizontal axis, your x-axis. Left mouse click there, you can click that little arrow, and it's now asking for the range that you want to enter. So left mouse click and drag right there, bring that down, okay, and okay. See, now we have our stock prices across. Now I can also change the range that I'm looking at here. Let's say I don't like the length of this tail out here, it's just too long. I only want to go to 130. Well, I can come up here and just grab that little square handle again and drag up to, let's say, to 130. See, now it's going to change my range. Maybe I wanted to start at 90. I can do that. See, I can make it anything that I want once I've got it in place. Now, if we wanted to do a column for stock, let's do that. Let's make a column for stock. What would be the formula here? Well, if the stock is 80, that's what I own, assuming I'm long shares of stock. So let's do equals this number minus 100, which is, let's say, the price that I paid. Copy that all the way down, grab your handle, and now if I want to see that risk graph, there's my shares of stock. What if I wanted to look at a covered call? Let's do a covered call. That formula is going to be equals take the long stock minus the call. Let's go ahead and drag that down. Click on the graph. Let's bring this over. And there's the risk graph for the covered call. So once I have a basic format, I can really just go through and change this stuff quite easily. Now, the nice thing about this is you can just do it on the fly. You just know which strikes you're dealing with. You can go in and just hard code these in as zeros or intrinsic value. But the problem is, what if you change your mind? What if you say, oh, I meant to do the 105 call at a cost of $2? Or what if we wanted to do the 200 strike at a cost of $20? Now you got to go back and do either the whole thing again or come through here and tweak it, and it can get very confusing about which formulas need to be changed. So that's one method. Again, this is just something if it's quick on the fly and you need to sketch out a graph. But let me show you what I would do if you're looking for a more permanent kind of a spreadsheet. I would come up and let's make one of stock. So let's create a column of calls. Let's see, I'm just going to say these are my call options. And let's put some strikes across here. Let's do 100, put a 105 and a 110, and maybe even a 120 for right now. So these are inputs. I'm going to make this a variable to where I can change it. Let's create our stock price. Now again, if I go through and hard code these, let's say 80 to 120, and I want to change it, I've got to change everything. So let's just tell Excel where we want to start. Let's say I want to start at 80. That's going to be another input. I usually put all my inputs in red. So the formula is to take that number. Now, what do we want to count by? So we'll make this label that our start. Let's call this an increment. And let's say we want to count by fives. Okay, so we're going to say a new formula is to take this number plus this number. However, if we do this and we copy it down, notice this time Excel sees this as taking the cell above plus, let's call it 1, 2, 3 up and 1 over. So if I copy it down, it's going to be looking at this cell and this one, and that's not what we want. We always want it to come to this cell. And that's called an anchor in Excel. And the way that we do that is with the F4 key. It's a faster way to do it. And do you see these little dollar signs? It's telling us to always go to C and always go to 5, which is what we want. We always want it to add that number to it. So now, if I copy this down, I can give myself a nice big list. So watch what happens if I want to start from 200. See, I can count by fives starting at 200. What if I want to count by ones? Make that 1. I can make these things anything that I want. Make it a 250 and count by 2.5s. There you go. So it's actually very easy to make it a lot more versatile, a lot more robust. It's just going to take a little bit of time, not long, but once you have it, you'll have it forever. All right, so now let's create a column for intrinsic value for the calls. Again, these are variable. I can make these anything that I want. So here we're going to have to get into a little bit of programming with an if statement. I'm going to click equals and then if, left parentheses. And what I want to say is if the number to the left is less than or equal to this number, we want it to be 0. There's no intrinsic value. Otherwise, we want to take the number to the left minus this number, and we hit the right parentheses, and there we go. Now this is where it starts to get a little tricky because we have some combinations of anchors and relative referencing. So here's a little bit of the logic behind it. Notice that I want to go one cell to the left over here to D. I'm not always going to go to 7 because when I copy it down I'm going to be looking at D8 and then D9, but I always want to come over to D. Because if I copy this formula over, see, if I tell it to go one cell to the left, when I copy the formula here in F, it's going to be looking at this number. We want to compare it to the stock number. So I'm going to anchor D, but I'm going to let 7 float. If it's less than or equal to E6, now here I always want to come up to 6, but not necessarily to E. Because when I copy it over, in this case I want it to go to F and then G and H. We definitely want the answer to be 0. And what's the formula? Take D7, again we always go over to D, so I need to anchor column D, and then I need to anchor row 6. Okay, so once we do that, I can now copy the formula down, but watch this, I can also copy it over. And see, now I've got the intrinsic value for all of these strikes. What if I make this the 200 strike? Of course, I'm going to have to start here at maybe 180. Let's make this the 205, the 210, and the 215. See, now it goes through and it figures out the intrinsic values for all of those. So it's just not real hard at all once you have that in place. And of course, now you can copy this out. You can make as many columns as you want. So that's the basic idea of it. And then if you want, you can come up here and say, we want to do a vertical spread. All right, let's just say we want to do the 200, 205. I'm going to say equals, we want to be long the 200 minus the 205. Let's say we paid 3. I'm just going to put minus 3. And if we do that, let's bring up insert our charts. There's our vertical spread. Now, what if I didn't want to have to manually type in 3? I could make a row for the cost. So let's say that these are prices across here. Now, of course, this is not the prettiest way to lay it out. I'm just trying to show you the logic behind it and the programming. So what you would do here is to say, for this formula, we want to do the same formula, but we're going to subtract the cost. And if we're going to copy this formula, we always want to come up to 5. Let's see, F2. We always want to come up to 5, but not necessarily to column E. So let's go ahead and anchor 5. That's row 5. Copy this formula down again. Copy it over. Now watch what happens if I make these, right, let's say this one is 10 and this one is 7. And so now the reason that we're underwater here is we hard-coded this to have -3. Let's just make our formula a little bit more generic, and there we go. So watch this. What if I paid 12 for this one and received 8 for this one? See, now I've got a net debit of 4 and I can see a max gain of 1. I could do a butterfly. Let's do a butterfly here. Let's say I am I'm long the 200. I'm also long, so plus the 210. And I'm going to do minus parentheses 2 times, because we're short 2 times the center. There. Click on the blue line, drag this over, and there's a butterfly spread. Now in this case, we've got the prices wrong, which is why it's showing an arbitrage. I've talked about this 3-strike pricing rule. Okay, so remember what that rule is. It just says that the average of the wings, the outer strikes out here, has to be greater than or equal to this number. So here we've got 15 divided by 2 is 7.5 is less than that. So that's why it's showing an arbitrage. So in the real world, that's not going to happen because you would be using real prices, but I can just fix that by doing something like this. And so that would be our butterfly spread. And so you can just go through and create, if you need more columns, you now have a versatile formula that you can copy these out and have as many columns as you want. And then to figure out what your risk graph is going to look like, add and subtract them up as needed. So let's try one more. Let's do a ratio spread. Let's say we want to do a ratio. I want to be long the 200 and minus parentheses 2 times the 205. Let's close that up and copy down. And then I'm going to drag this over. And there's a ratio spread. Now again, if you want to include shares of stock, so you would just say equals, here's the current price of the stock, minus the price I paid, let's say is maybe 210. I could put in an input to make the stock price right here, maybe the price that I paid, so that could be variable. And then when we click here, drag it over, there's your long stock. Now here's a neat thing you can do. What if you wanted a short position? What if I wanted this short butterfly? Do I have to go through and reprogram it again? Well, here's an easier way. Let's do the short fly. I'm just going to say equals, take my long fly times -1. That's just going to flip it. It's the trader on the other side. So now, if I do this, there's the short butterfly. So it's a really neat way to go through and, if nothing else, just to practice and to understand what's going to happen to a risk graph. So here's a more of a cleaned up version, and we'll certainly leave this up to you if you want to take the time, but I've created one with calls and puts. Same formulas that I just showed, so I can copy these things out. I can copy the rows down as far as I want to go. So now if I'm trying to do, let's say for a quick video and I want a vertical spread, I'm just going to say I want equals the 100 strike minus the 105 strike, and I can copy that down. And there's my vertical. I could change the price. Let's say I want to make that 9. And I say, okay, that looks good. Let's say I've got 3 stock prices below this strike. Let's knock one up off the top here. And there we go. So there's the 100, 105 vertical spread. Just copy paste that right into your PowerPoint. Now, if you're really motivated, you can do this. Now, this is one that I actually created this a long time ago, but you can hide all of the calculations on a back sheet. And so I've got stock, I have calls, puts, and what you can do is, let's say if I want to, let's do a butterfly. I want to be long the 95. I want to be short 2 of the hundreds, and I want to be long the 105. And then if we enter, there's our butterfly. If I want to put prices in, what did I pay for this one? What did I receive for this one? So I could, if I just wanted to do a quick chart, I might say it was a net of 2. There's a butterfly for a net of 2. If I buy shares of stock, what if I buy 100 shares at a cost of 100? Okay, that's going to be my risk graph. And you should know intuitively that long shares have 100 deltas for the entire range of your graph, and the butterfly has 0, at least out on the wings. So overall, you should have deltas at the far left and the far right sides. And so that would be the resulting risk graph. So this will take you a little bit more time. It's really exactly the same calculations that I just showed. There's nothing really any more to it. It's just going to take a lot more time to create the designs. But hopefully that will be something that can help you to get started. I know it can be a little odd that you would think there'd be a lot more websites that would show these risk graphs. So if you're bumping into those problems, give this a shot. Excel is not that hard. There's a lot of tutorials on YouTube if you get stuck with it. And if you do, also feel free to post in our group in Facebook, and I'll be more than happy to help. But I hope that will at least get you started. And for anyone who'd like to learn more about the art and science of options trading, please check out the Alpha Trader course, Strategy Lab, and a Candlesticks and Technical Analysis course. You can find it all at optionsatoz.com. Also, please join us on Options A to Z's Facebook trading group, and you can find a link in the description below.